Welcome back to Perkins Pipes. Got a very, very deep topic for us today. And a deep topic like this requires a pretty serious pipe. So we've got the Peterson Professor from the Sherlock Holmes line. Got my favorite Prince Albert in the bowl. Let's get this guy lit. Let's get to talking. I say this is a deep topic because we're going to get into some pretty heavy philosophy today. When I started this channel, I said we'd be talking about everything, right? Philosophy and art and music and books and pipes, of course, and all that kind of good stuff. And over time, I have to admit, we've talked far less about straight philosophy than many other topics. So it was time to come back to a serious, pretty deep, heady philosophy episode. So let me just say right away, if this is your cup of tea, you might want to go grab a cup of tea, pipe if you enjoy one, sit back, and let's get into the stuff. One of my favorite dialogues by Plato is one called the Theaetetus. And I want to throw that name here into a text so everybody can see how to spell that. Theaetetus. And you may have heard of some of Plato's dialogues, even if you're not, a philosophy major or anything, but you may have read parts of the Republic, for example. You may have run across Plato's Symposium and some things. But the Theaetetus is probably not one that most people have run across. It has, however, given us a phrase in English that you probably have heard or some variation of it. Man is the measure of all things. I'll set this one up a little bit for you. So, as you know, or may know, the main character in Plato's dialogues is a guy named Socrates. Now, this is the historic Socrates, but in a way it isn't. It would be like me writing a story involving Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and Winston Churchill all sitting down and having a conversation. Now, these are all real people, but I'm the author, and I have taken them out of their context and kind of used them as characters or mouthpieces for things that I want to say. So that's what Plato does. Socrates is his main character, and then he engages with other people in these dialogues. So in the Theaetetus, he talks with a couple of different guys, mainly a young man named Theaetetus, hence the name of the dialogue, and someone that Theaetetus knew, who, again, was a real person, a man named Protagoras. Now, you may be thinking Pythagoras, that's the guy of a squared plus b squared equals c squared, Pythagorean theorem, all right? But that's not that guy. This is a different guy, Protagoras. And Protagoras was what we call one of the pre-Socratic philosophers. He came along before Socrates. He was also what we call a sophist. He was a guy who went around teaching philosophy for pay, and this was a novel thing. The sophists were the first professional teachers. And at any rate, this Protagoras guy had the line, man is the measure of all things. So Socrates, the character, basically wants to take issue with that line and does so in this dialogue with this young man named Theaetetus. And at one point, they quote Protagoras. And we don't have any of Protagoras' actual writings. So all we have are quotations from him in other works like this by Plato. And the actual line runs like this. He says, Man is the measure of all things, alike of the being of things that are, and of the non-being of things that are not. And doesn't that sound wonderfully heady and philosophical and so forth? All right, what does that really mean? It means what Protagoras said it meant, and that is what is brought out elsewhere in this dialogue. Another line of his is that everything is to a person as it appears or as it seems. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. You walk into a room and you say, "Woo, it's chilly in here," and your friend says, "What are you talking about? It's hotter than blazes." According to this, the idea is, well, you're both right. It is to you as it seems to you. Okay, so if it seems cool to you, or even cold, then it is in fact cold. And if it seems hot to you, then it is in fact hot. Each person, each human being, man in the generic sense, is the measure of all things, alike of the being of things that are. So in other words, it is cold to me, therefore it is cold. It is not hot to me, so alike of the not being of things that are not. That's a crazy way to phrase it. It doesn't feel hot to me, therefore it isn't hot. Okay. And Socrates, the character, Plato through the mouthpiece of Socrates, goes on to show how this is absolute nonsense. This is absolute nonsense. It's a radical, and radical in the sense of going back to the radix, the Latin word for root. It's a radical form of relativism. It just undermines all of reality that you and I know, and it just doesn't work. And Plato demonstrates this through the mouthpiece of Socrates. He says, look, at some point, all communication breaks down. We can't even have communication. Right? I say this is a pipe lighter, and you say it's a peanut butter sandwich. And if it really is a pipe lighter for me, and it really is a peanut butter sandwich for you, we don't even have a basis for communication. We don't even have a basis for sharing words and ideas, and yet clearly we do. So it shows that this whole idea is absolute nonsense. It's something we call, he's showing that it's nonsense by a process called reductio ad absurdum, a reduction to absurdity. He takes the line of argument, chases it out to its logical conclusion, and says, and clearly that conclusion is absurd. It's ridiculous. And if the conclusion is absurd, then the original premise has to be absurd as well. Now, this is a good one to have in your back pocket for conversations you may have today. I have actually had students, high school students, say to me that murder might be right. Now, we're not talking about killing in the defense of a country or anything like that or whatever. No. I'm talking about me coming into your house and committing a heinous act like murder. One of my students said one time, if you came over to my house and killed my mother, it would be wrong for her, obviously, because she's dead. This girl said it would be wrong for me because, I'm her daughter and that would be a bad thing. But it might be right for you. And this sort of radical relativism, you hear it all the time. You hear it in the phrase, my truth, speaking your truth. Okay, you can speak your opinion all day long. I can speak my opinion all day long. But when it comes to truth, there's only one. Either 2 + 2 is 4 or it isn't. Either this is a pipe lighter or it's a peanut butter sandwich. So just in a general sort of way, this falls apart. Now, some of you who have been listening very carefully might know that I've been playing a little bit fast and loose with some of my examples. A pipe lighter could be a peanut butter sandwich, okay? Not that I would ever do this, but I could jam some bread down into the lid. I could smear the top of that with peanut butter, and I could, take a bite. So in a way, it could be both a peanut butter sandwich and a pipe lighter, and okay. But in terms of just general, normal conversation of people, the character of Socrates has a good point. Communication just breaks down if you take this radically relativist view that man is the measure of all things, that something is as it appears or as it seems to me. But, and here's the but, it turns out that modern physics, and by modern I mean going back to the early part of the 20th century, says that maybe Protagoras was right. I'm talking about quantum theory, quantum mechanics. And you're going, okay, Perkins, that's quite enough of that. Let's shut this channel off and go listen to some of your Deep Purple music. All right, I can handle that. Well, hang with me for a minute. If you've hung with me this far, hang with me for a moment longer. One of the interpretations, and we're not going to get into serious physics here, we're not going to get into math, so don't worry about that. Although some of you might wish that we did. One of the interpretations of quantum theory is exactly what Protagoras said. That something is as it appears. Okay? And there's a famous thought experiment, and I'm going to grossly oversimplify this thought experiment. So any of you serious physicists out there, cut us a slack, all right? Cut us some slack. I'm doing this for the sake of a video for a wide audience here. So let me simplify this grossly. It's the idea of Schrödinger's cat. And the idea is, imagine a cat in a box. And there's literally no room for the cat to move. All right, this is literally a cat-sized box. There's a hole in one end of the box facing the cat's head. And through that hole, you put a gun. You pull the trigger. Blam! Meow! And silence. Okay. Is the cat alive or dead? In this grossly oversimplified example, the quantum theorist would say the cat is in a state of being both alive and dead until you open the box lid and look in. Until you actually take what's called a measurement, in this case, measuring it with your eyes. You go, but I heard the gunshot. No, doesn't matter. You have to have an actual measurement. You actually have to have perception of what's in the box to know whether the cat is alive or dead. Until then, it is both alive and dead at the same time. Now, this runs afoul of a fundamental principle in logic, Aristotle's law of non-contradiction, which basically says something cannot be what it is and not be what it is at the same time. So it is possible that this could be a peanut butter sandwich and a pipe lighter. What Aristotle would say is, you cannot say that this object is a pipe lighter and not a pipe lighter at the same time. That's a contradiction. You can't say that. It's a pipe lighter and a paperweight. I could set it down and hold my papers down, right? It's a pipe lighter and a memento. It's a pipe lighter and a gift. All those things are fine. They're not contradictory. But you cannot say it is both a pipe lighter and not a pipe lighter. Yet that's exactly what Protagoras this pre-Socratic philosopher was getting at, and it is what modern-day quantum theory says about the quantum world. The subatomic world. That something could both be and not be at the same time until a measurement is taken. Let me fire this up one more time. What do y'all think about that? It's a curiosity. It's some interesting stuff to think about. I don't know that it changes your day or mine in any grand way. We certainly don't live in the quantum world. We don't live in that sort of the subatomic space and what's going on there. We live in this macro world where atoms have combined to make, trees, pipes, hats. And so maybe in our world it's best to stick with Socrates' interpretation of Protagoras' idea that man is the measure of all things, and showing it to be complete nonsense. At any rate, love to hear your thoughts, what you think about this kind of thing. As Malcolm Guite likes to say, I do these little things in order at last to do nothing. Or as I say in Latin, Parva ago ut tandem. Nihil agam. Have a wonderful day.
There was a man who walked the earth.